Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Whenever we beat Ohio State at anything, it's a good day. Last Sunday down in Columbus was sweet. Number 3 against number 4, the Big Ten race still up for grabs, and we seized the moment. Beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News joins us on our Game Day segment to discuss that game and much more. First, a few of my thoughts to get us started. Last weekend was beautiful. We went down to Columbus to play Ohio State with so much on the line. It was a national TV game, the first time ever meeting between these two teams when we were both top 5, and the Big Ten race still very much on the line. I don't even care there were very few people in the stands at that place. It was a great game, and in the end, our poise and execution led us to victory, a hard-fought victory. It was very satisfying, though. What made the weekend even better was hockey going down to Columbus and splitting a pair with Ohio State. It would have been nice to sweep them, but we'll take the split. Then Kim Barnes-Arico and the ladies beating the Buckeyes up here on Sunday evening, so it doesn't get much better than that. Juwan Howard has his guys playing elite basketball this year. The next 2 weeks will see us playing a very challenging schedule, to say the least, with the Big Ten regular season championship well within our grasp. We are recording the show on Thursday morning. Tonight, Iowa visits Chrysler for another top 10 matchup. Then Saturday, it's down to Bloomington to meet a very good IU team. Then back here next week for another huge top 10 encounter with the Fighting Illini. It's going to be fun. My guest today says if Michigan can win the next 2, then beat the Illini here next week, we could clinch a Big Ten title. And I know that's getting ahead of ourselves, but the way this team is playing, it could happen. Beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News joins me next on our Game Day segment on this week's edition of The Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. Once again, great to have you back, James.
Good to be back.
Well, we are headed down the home stretch, James. Michigan still in first place. Got some help last night from Michigan State in beating Illinois, which really did help the cause. And at the same time, it was a big win for the Spartans, and looks like they might be turning it on at the right time.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny how maybe it looks like, Michigan has kind of switched roles, I guess, over in recent years. I mean, you think of Michigan was always the team that was, always maybe hitting its stride or kind of making that push down the closing stretch. But, I mean, obviously Michigan State, they're playing for their tournament lives right now. And, yeah, I mean, you can tell that they've been playing with a sense of urgency and taking down Illinois last night. And like you said, I mean, that obviously was a big win for Michigan State, but also a big win for Michigan because that helps, clear the path for Michigan's, first Big Ten title since 2014. Obviously Illinois has, 4 games left, and they kind of have a pretty tough closing stretch there. I mean, they only play once at home, and that's against Nebraska, and then their final 3 games are on the road at Wisconsin, at Michigan, and at Ohio State. And obviously Michigan, though, they don't have an easy schedule either here closing out. I mean, they got 5 games left Thursday night at home against Iowa, then they got road games against Indiana and Michigan State, and then they still got to play, Michigan State and Illinois at home. But yeah, I mean, the Illinois loss is huge for Michigan in terms of just the Big Ten title chase. And I think crunching the numbers, I mean, Michigan just has to win 3 of their final 5 games to kind of secure the title. And I mean, that's also assuming that Illinois wins out in the final 4 games. But yeah, I mean, that win, like you said, it was huge in multiple ways, for Michigan State's, tournament hopes, kind of helping them push towards the bubble. And then obviously with Michigan's chase here towards the Big Ten title.
James, I think Michigan fans are still buzzing, though, about that big win down in Columbus on Sunday. And that game did have the feel of a championship or NCAA tournament game. A lot of folks said maybe the best basketball game in college this year.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the best game I've seen, and I don't remember how long. I don't remember what the best Michigan game was that I witnessed before that. I mean, that was just, from the start, that was just a high-level game, just with the offenses just flaring it out. On all cylinders. I mean, it was just back and forth. It was incredible. And I mean, if you look at the shooting percentages, if you just look at what Ohio State did, you almost wonder how Michigan won. I mean, Ohio State shot, 53% from the floor. made half their three-pointers, and they shot over 90% from the free throw line. I think if you just looked at their stats, you might have been like, you might have thought that Michigan was in trouble in that game. But I mean, Michigan, I mean, they also shot over 53%, and they made almost half their threes in that game too. And I mean, they just made all the kind of the critical plays. They're kind of in those final 4 minutes that kind of helped them pull that out. But that's a game too, though. I think if they replay that game, I don't think there's a lot of things would happen again in that game. Like I don't think anyone would assume Michigan would shoot 10 for 13 from three like they did in the first half, and then I don't think they would also shoot 1 for 10 from three in the second half. That was the best game I've seen in a while, and it definitely had the feel of like a Final Four game. And I think that's the cool thing though too. I think that was like the type of game that lived up to the hype and kind of lived up to the billing, just going into that with that being a top 5 matchup. But yeah, that was just an incredible game. And I think the one thing that stands out too is it showed that Michigan, they played with poise and composure though, just not to get rattled or kind of blink at any point in that game. Just because, like I said, it was just back and forth the entire time for like over 36 minutes, just until Michigan was able to kind of create enough separation there down in those final few minutes.
Well, I know there were no fans in the stands in Columbus, but still a road win against your arch rival in their house, the number 4 team in America, that counts for a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot. Just, I mean, if you look at Michigan last season, that was kind of the thing that Michigan struggled with, was winning on the road. Fans factor into that at some point, but I mean, all these games, I mean, there's no fans, taking place, so it's not like any team has an advantage anymore. I mean, but still, I mean, I guess the home teams still do have a slight edge just because they have that familiarity with their court and in that environment, obviously, And two, I mean, just look at what Michigan's record was in Columbus heading into that game. I mean, they lost 4 straight at Value City Arena. They lost, 14 of their last 16 trips there. Most of those games, I think like 8 or something like that. I mean, they lost by double digits. So a lot of times they went there, I mean, they left, with disappointment and double-digit defeats. And I think that, that says a lot that, that they were able to go in there and kind of finally come out with a win. And the same thing, too, with the game when they went to the Kohl Center. That was another place where, Michigan historically struggled. And everything that makes this more impressive is just the fact that the Wolverines are doing this after coming off that, that 3-week layoff and that 2-week athletic department shutdown where they weren't even able to practice together. So I think when you factor that into the equation, I think that just makes, everything that Michigan has been able to do over the, these last 2 games even more impressive.
Oh, absolutely. So many guys played big on Sunday in that win, but 2 stood out, I think, to me and everyone watching. Johnny Brown off the bench, Hunter Dickinson really taking over in the paint in the second half. But starting with Brown, has this guy exceeded expectations or what, James?
I don't know. Like I said, I think I talked to you about this last time we talked, but it's kind of one of those things like you didn't know kind of what to expect from Shawnee coming in, just because if you looked at, obviously he was a 3-year starter at Wake Forest before he came here. I think there was maybe questions about how he would handle a role. Like there was, when Juwan Howard was recruiting him, he told him like he wasn't guaranteed any, a starting role, or he wasn't guaranteeing him any minutes or anything like that. So on one hand, it was kind of unknown how, Shawnee was going to adapt to taking on a new role after, being one of the key guys that Wake Forest had for 3 years in a row. That's been a credit to him this entire season, that he's bought into this. And I mean, he's scoring the least amount of points and playing fewer minutes than maybe he has had throughout his entire college career. But it says a lot to him that he's just bought in, and he's been one of the best 6 men in the Big Ten this year. I think you can obviously make a strong case for him for winning that award. And I think in the win at Ohio State, he kind of showed. I mean, he came off and he just hit those 3 threes in a row, making his first 3 long-range shots. That kind of helped Michigan pull ahead and take their first lead of the game. And, I mean, he's one of the better defenders on Michigan's team. I know Isaiah Livers said at one point he thinks that him and Eli Brooks are all Big Ten type defenders and should be on the all, Big Ten defensive team at the end of the year. The one thing, too, is that he just plays with, just with grit and toughness every time he's out there. I think the best example of that was on that one possession where he ended up grabbing the 2 offensive rebounds and scoring on that putback which gave Michigan the lead for good in the game at Ohio State. But yeah, I think Sean D has just been everything that you would have hoped he would have been, and more this season, just with everything he's been able to provide off the bench and the spark he's been able to consistently provide. I mean, and even when he's not, been scoring, I mean, he's still making an impact on the defensive end, just digging down and making life miserable for whoever he's guarding.
Then there's Hunter. I know he's 20. They kept mentioning that on the telecast on Sunday, but he is still a freshman. But by now it's more than apparent the stage is not too big for this young man, is it?
No, I mean, that was one thing that Juwan Howard got asked after the game was just how, if he had any concern about, Hunter going into a game like this. But I mean, Michigan's kind of played in bigger games, I guess you could say, before this. I mean, like when they had the game at home against Wisconsin, I think that was still a top 10 matchup. And I mean, Hunter had a pretty big game there. But yeah, I think just the one thing that as of late, he kind of, I guess he wasn't having the monster games he was having, earlier on in Big Ten play, just because obviously he's becoming more of a focal point and he's getting more attention by opposing defenses, so he's facing more of those double teams. And I think, Sunday's game was just an example of him just learning from those previous experiences and, just putting in the work in film and just knowing how to handle those double teams better. And the one thing that really stand out to me was in the first half, just when he made a couple of those cross court passes and that kind of got guys open looks. I think one of them was to Eli in a corner and another one was to Shawn D. Brown on the wing. Those are a pair of impressive passes. And then, he also started to finally get some one-on-one matchups, which he's shown that he can take advantage of. And he just looked like he was just determined in the entire second half. And I mean, Michigan just wasn't afraid to keep going to him. And that kind of showed. I mean, I think he had one stretch where he scored 10 of, Michigan's 15 points when they kind of took the lead for good. So, he kind of took over in the second half of that game. But, I think the one thing, though, too, with Hunter that has maybe impressed me more so is the one thing that, sometimes freshmen big men struggle with is kind of defending without fouling. But that's one thing he hasn't really had trouble with at all this season. I think there's maybe been a game or two where he's run into some really foul trouble. But I think that's one thing that doesn't get said enough is just how he's been able to defend, to wall up and alter shots and block shots without ever really getting in foul trouble. And, I mean, you go back to earlier in the season when Austin Davis was out for those 4 games, Michigan could have been in trouble, if Hunter ever gotten into foul trouble like that. But he never did. And, so it was never a concern. Yeah, but that was just so I think that's another point that needs to be made about him that he's been doing well that maybe gets overlooked a little bit. But I think Sunday was just, maybe a showing of, the Hunter Dickinson of the old, I guess, in a sense, just how he kind of returned to his dominant self, especially in that second half.
Well, Livers and Wagner were solid on Sunday, but the other guy who just continues to impress me, like Chandi, this guy's far exceeded my expectations. It's Mike Smith. I don't even care that he played 4 years in the Ivy League. This guy is proving he is a big-time point guard, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy. Like we said with Shawnee, he's just a dude who's bought into his role, never tries to do too much. And, I mean, he's been doing obviously an amazing job, facilitating and running the offense. I think he's still leading the Big Ten in assists. One of the keys in the second half in the game at Ohio State was the fact that Michigan only had 1 turnover in the second half. I mean, they had 7 for the game, but that was a key stat, and that was probably one of the bigger differences in the game was the fact that they were valuing the possessions and not giving Ohio State extra possessions in the game that it was obviously back and forth throughout the entire game. And I mean, obviously Mike Smith has a huge hand in that, and I think he finished that game with 7 assists and he only had 1 turnover. But I think he's another guy where he's maybe exceeded expectations for what people had for him coming in, because obviously there was questions about how he would obviously fare or adapt, to the Big Ten, making that step up from the Ivy League to the Big Ten. But I think he's met every expectation. And I mean, he's shown though at points though too, he can score when needed to. I mean, I think there was in the game against Rutgers when Michigan kind of had that one offensive slump where they were kind of struggling to score points. I think he had that one point where he kind of just drove the ball and just scored on a scooping layup, and it kind of just looked like, the Mike Smith of his Columbia days where it was kind of like Michigan just needed a basket, so he just went off and got it. But I think he's just been everything and more that Michigan has needed this year, particularly in filling that, that facilitator role that Xavier Simpson left behind.
Well, it doesn't get any easier this week, though, other than the fact we are at home Thursday against Iowa. The Hawkeyes are a scary team when they're on, but the matchup I think everyone will be watching is going to be Garza with Hunter Dickinson, and these guys are not strangers to each other, are they?
No, they both grew up in the same area, and they both came through the team takeover AAU team, so they have some familiarity with each other, and I think they've been playing with each other practicing with each other and playing with each other for a while. I think Luka was playing above Hunter, like on the team takeover team. I think he was playing on maybe the older teams, but I think they would practice with one another when their AAU teams were holding practices. So I mean, they've worked out together, they practiced together, they've known each other since I believe since Hunter was in middle school or maybe in 8th grade. So they have quite the history together. And I know this past off season during quarantine and during the pandemic, they were also working out together with their AAU coach Keith Stevens. So they definitely have a familiarity with one another, and they know each other's games. And that's going to be interesting, though, too, heading into that matchup. It's not like, neither guy's going to know each other, but, I mean, they're going to maybe know what each guy does best, and, they kind of are going to have a feel for how to guard one another, maybe how to take away certain things that each guy does well. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. It's going to be kind of the battle within the big battle, so to say.
We'll talk about this Iowa team, James, and what you see as the key matchups for Michigan on Thursday night.
Obviously, I mean, I think Iowa, they have plenty of talent across the board. I mean, they have Jordan Bohannon, C.J. Frederick, Joe Wieskamp. I mean, they have a talented perimeter. And obviously in the middle they have Luka Garza. For me, the big thing that I'm going to be watching, I mean, obviously I think everyone's going to have most of their attention on the battle in the paint with Luka and Hunter. I think that's obviously going to be probably one of the key matchups, just in a sense to see how. I think the big key though is just going to be if Hunter can stay out of foul trouble, like we were just talking about earlier, because we know that Luka Garza is good at drawing contact and maybe playing physical. So I think that's going to be one of the big keys. And obviously, if you look at the matchups last season, I mean, Luka kind of torched Michigan in both those games. I think he set the building record at Chrysler Center for scoring by an opponent when he scored 44. And then I think in the rematch when it was at Iowa, I think he scored 33. So I think clearly he's going to be the priority number one heading into the matchup, is seeing Michigan trying to slow him down. And so I think that's just going to be something to watch, is just how Hunter holds up on the defensive end, and just maybe what Michigan decides to do if they want to try to double him or dig down, how they kind of handle that. Because I know last year that was one of the things where they just kind of left Luka one-on-one. They kind of just took away the three-point line and just kind of let him get his. And then, I mean, it worked at home when I think they won, and it was like, a 102-91 or something game like that. It was just a crazy, ridiculous offensive game. So that's going to be something to watch. But another thing to watch, I think, is just Iowa, as of late, I mean, over their last 5 games, they've been actually playing pretty solid defense. I think no opponent scored more than 70 points. And, I mean, they've been holding opponents to under 40% shooting. So they've found something. I think they've been playing more man to man, and that's kind of been working for them. So I think that's going to be another thing to watch. Earlier on in the season, it was almost like if any team was in an offensive slump, I mean, playing Iowa would kind of cure those ills. But it seems like they found something as of late. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing, too, to watch, is just to see if Iowa's going to be able to continue to play this improved defense that they've shown over these last 5 games, and if it's going to be able to slow down, Michigan's offense at all.
The key to this game is getting key stops or turnovers, because just like Sunday down in Columbus, both of these offense can just light it up, can't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this could be another game where it's just another offensive showdown, or just where both teams are just executing at a high level. But I think the one thing, I mean, if that does happen, Michigan has shown that, that they can dig down and get stops when they need to. Like we saw in the game at Ohio State, when they were able to string together enough stops there in the final 4 minutes. And then the same thing when they played their home game against Rutgers, when they had that one stretch where I think they went something like 7 minutes and they scored just 1 point. I think within that they had like a 5-minute scoring drought, and they went like over 6 minutes with between made field goals. I mean, that stretch, I mean, they kind of saw, what was it? They had like a 17-point lead and only dipped down to 12. Mm-hmm. So I mean, Michigan's shown they can lock in and string together stops when they need to, especially in a game where it's if it is one of those ones where the offense kind of gets rolling. I mean, they've shown that they can kind of lock down and get the key stops at key points, and that's something I don't know if Iowa's proven or shown. If they can get into a game where it's like that, if it's an offensive shootout, they can string together stops at key moments like that. I mean, if it's a game that does get to that, I mean, Michigan might have an edge in that, just because, like we said, that they've proven and they've shown that they can buckle down and get and kind of dig down and get stops when they need to.
Well, after Iowa, Michigan has Indiana on Saturday, then Illinois, followed by 2 against what could be a red-hot Michigan State team by the time they get together. One thing for certain, though, there is not one gimme in that bunch of games, is there?
No, this is definitely, I think when everyone looked at Michigan's schedule at the beginning of the year, I think it was always that the closing month, the final month of the season, I think everyone looked to was going to be the hardest stretch of the schedule, and I think that's still the case. I think the big thing that kind of stands out over these next 3 games is just that Michigan's going to be going up against some of the best big men in the Big Ten. I mean, obviously, there's so many good big men in the Big Ten, but I mean, especially that's going to be the case over these next 3 games with Luka Garza. Then you have Trace Jackson Davis, and then after that you have Kofi Coburn. So this is going to be a big stretch for Hunter Dickinson. And like I said, the big key is just going to see for him to just stay out of foul trouble, because I mean, going back to the Illinois Michigan State game, that was, I mean, how many big men almost fouled out or did foul out for Michigan State, just trying to defend Kofi and just using up their fouls on him. So yeah, I mean, this is just going to be a key stretch. I mean, obviously with Indiana, like I said, Trace Jackson Davis is their star player, so I mean that's going to pose problems. And then with Illinois, they probably have one of the best inside-outside tandems in the nation, with Kofi Coburn and Ayo Dosunmu, who is making his case for Big Ten and National Player of the Year, and has proven to be one of the best closers in college basketball. And then obviously with Michigan State, as you pointed out, they could be on a hot streak and making a push there towards the end, and they're going to have plenty to play for in those two games. So it's definitely setting up for an exciting closing stretch. And who knows, maybe the game against Illinois would be the game that could decide if Michigan wins the Big Ten. Not, I mean, that would obviously make that game much more exciting. So I mean, definitely meaningful games here down the stretch, and definitely going to be 5 exciting games heading into the postseason, the best time of the year.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a great stretch, and it will leave Michigan, if the schedule holds up, with 17 games played of the 20 in Big Ten play. Do you think there is any chance Michigan or the Big Ten will sneak a makeup game in during these next 2 weeks?
No, I don't think so. Just because when they announced the schedule changes last week, they kind of said it was for over the final 2 weeks. So I don't think that they're going to. I think they obviously made the Illinois and Michigan State games higher priorities to reschedule just to protect the rivalry, and then just for the fact that Michigan hadn't played Illinois this season yet before that game got postponed. Because, I mean, the other 3 games that they had a home game against Indiana, then they had the road games against Penn State and Northwestern. So those games just weren't higher priorities. But I just don't think that they're going to. I think what they rescheduled is what they're going to go with. I don't see them rescheduling anything more, just because after they play Indiana, there's really not going to be room for them to maybe wiggle in another game. Just because I think they're going to have stretches with 2 games in 3 days. Like I think they play Illinois, and then they have a day break, and they play Michigan State. So I just don't think they're going to try to cram in that many games. Just given the time where Michigan had their layoff, kind of like after the midway point of the season, I just don't think that there's enough time for them to maybe re-wiggle and reconfigure the schedule, and maybe make things work with how all the other schedules they have that they'd have to kind of move around and shift around. So I think Michigan, barring any other cancellations, knock on wood, I think they're just going to have 17 Big Ten games a season before a Big Ten tournament.
Well, nothing is written in stone these days. We know with everything that's going on with COVID. If nothing changes in the next couple of weeks, the Big Ten is still on course to hold the tournament, aren't they, James?
I mean, that was kind of a talking point maybe over the past month. There's, conversations or talks about whether conference tournaments should even be held. The idea was thrown out that maybe given the postponements and everything that, teams throughout the country and leagues has had to deal with, maybe using like the week of, conference tournaments to make up games, to play a complete, league slate. But, yeah, that's not going to happen with the Big Ten. Obviously, they moved the site from Chicago to Illinois to make it easier, just less risk, just because I guess Chicago is having more problems there. So I think the whole plan is to kind of move on. I mean, because, if they weren't having a Big Ten tournament, I think they would have already had to have made an announcement by now that they weren't going to be holding it. But, yeah, so the plan is to move ahead, and obviously there's television dollars and everything that goes into having it. So, yeah, for now it's for the Big Ten to still hold their tournament as scheduled starting on March 10th. And then, obviously, if Michigan holds up, they won't be playing till the quarterfinals, so they won't even be playing till March 12th.
Well, on that Sunday game, CBS color analyst Bill Raftery said in all of the years he's watched the Big Ten, he's never seen it better from top to bottom. And at 77 years old, he's seen some great seasons and some great players. It's hard to argue this is not the best league in college basketball, isn't it?
But yeah, it's kind of the same thing as last year. The Big Ten's proven that it's the toughest and one of the most talented and best conferences in college basketball. And I think you can just look at, all you have to do is just look at the bracket projections or the AP rankings. Anything. The Big Ten has 8 or maybe, I think they have at least 8 for sure in the NCAA tournament field, and they have a couple more on the bubble or something like that. So they could have up to 10 teams in the NCAA tournament this year. And what you have, Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, Illinois, they're all in the top 10 teams in the nation. So, I think coming into the season, I think people expected it to be, the top conferences in the nation. I think it's only proven that throughout the season that this is, one of the best conferences in all of college basketball. And, there's plenty of stuff to back it up. Like I said, you can just look at, net rankings, AP rankings, the NCAA tournament projections. All that kind of just shows the Big Ten, once again, has kind of been the best league in college basketball.
Final question for you, James, before we let you get away. Even though it has been a strange year in every way, but by this time, any season, we can usually say this team or that team has the look of a Final Four team. They're just that good. Does Michigan have that look to you?
Yeah, definitely. You have to just look at what they've been able to do all season long. No team that they've come across has seemingly been a bad matchup. That's a big thing come tournament time. Is obviously a big part of it is just kind of who you match up against. But yeah, I think just Michigan has shown throughout the season that they can win in different ways. And like we've talked about before, I mean, they don't have, an offense that's relying on one guy. They don't have like one star player that they rely on that, an opposing team can kind of focus on and shut down. I mean, they have a pick your poison type offense where, I mean, they have everyone in the starting lineup and even Shawnee Brown. I mean, they have 6 guys who are capable of scoring, maybe 18, 20 points a game. They're capable of leaning on any certain guy on any given night to kind of carry the load. And on the other end, they've shown that they can dig down and, use their defense to kind of pull out and win games. I mean, I think they're only one of, a few teams that maybe rank in the top 10 in, offensive and defensive efficiency in the nation. So, I mean, like I said, I think they've shown throughout the year that they can win in different ways. They can win grinded out games that come down to the wire. They can just lean on their offense to just kind of blow out opponents like they did when they were winning by, that stretch where they're winning, beating ranked opponents by 19 points a game or whatever it was. So yeah, this team definitely has, all the pieces. It has the experience. It has, the guys who already had the experience of playing in big games in the tournament, with Isaiah Livers and Eli Brooks, guys that have played on the big stage before. They got the depth. Like I said, they got Shawnee Brown, Brandon Johns, Austin Davis. Yeah, I think they have everything that you need for a team to kind of make a deep run. And like I said, just given everything they've done this season and the body of work that they've shown, they definitely have the makings of a team that can make a deep run in the postseason.
Here with us on our Game Day segment this week has been beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News talking Michigan hoops. Going to be a great stretch, James, to end the regular season in the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament. So in the next few weeks, we will get you back and see what's happening, and we look forward to that visit.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, Michigan women's basketball hits the road for the first of 2 straight games, heading to face the Iowa Hawkeyes in the only meeting this season between the two teams. The game will feature the Big Ten's top 2 scorers in Naz Hillman and Iowa's Caitlin Clark. The 2 players were on the 2019 USA U19 team that won a gold medal at the FIBA World Cup. Michigan is looking for its 6th road win of the season. We are 13-2 overall, 8-2 in Big Ten action heading into this weekend. We'll be up in Minnesota to take on the Gophers Sunday afternoon to round out that trip. Hockey hosts Arizona State this weekend at Yost Arena in the final scheduled home games of the season, with the teams facing off Friday and Saturday. Both contests are slated for 7 p.m., and each will be streamed live on the Big Ten Network Plus. Following Saturday night's game, Michigan will honor its 4 seniors. Coverage will be available on the Michigan Hockey Facebook page. We are 10-8 in the Big Ten, 12-8 overall, with just 3 games remaining in the regular season after this weekend. Number 17 Michigan softball will kick off its 44th season of intercollegiate play with 3 Big Ten doubleheaders facing Purdue, Iowa, and Illinois this Friday through Sunday in its first of 2 bubble weekends in Leesburg, Florida. The Wolverines returned 16 letter winners from last season's team, including 7 starting position players and 2 starting pitchers. Among them are All-American Megan Bobian and All-Region selections Lexi Blair and Alex Storako. Head coach Carol Hutchins is in her 37th season at the helm of the Michigan program and is the 2nd winningest coach in NCAA softball history. Michigan baseball announced its 2021 schedule last week. The conference-only slate consists of 44 games, including 16 at home, 20 on the road, and 8 at neutral sites. Every Big Ten team will juggle a varied schedule consisting of 4-game series and multi-team weekend series featuring games against 2 schools. Michigan will kick off the 2021 slate on March 6th through the 8th against Iowa with a featured tournament at Dell Diamond in Round Rock, Texas, with the Wolverines and Hawkeyes playing a 4-game series. On March 12th through the 14th, Michigan will play Purdue in a 4-game series at Fluor Field in Greenville, South Carolina. It's great to have both softball and baseball back in action, as well as the other spring sports. That will do it for another show. Thanks for taking time from your busy schedule to download and listen to us. Make sure you tell your Michigan family and friends about the show, too. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone, Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!